Everyone wants to feel confident and 100% capable of learning novel things. And yet, we seldom allow new pathways of thinking, feeling, and being to lead our experiences. Live into 5D weekly episodes are akin to personal agency microdosing, perking insights that lead to breakthrough action. In today's episode, NLP Coach, educator, intuitive energy healer Vicchi Oleski is joined by PhD candidate in Integrative Medicine, founder of the IHA Way, Gayle Swift. Ms. Swift's work focuses on the power of ability to choose the inner state of consciousness and how we perceive ourselves and the outer world as powerful determinants of health, vitality, and well-being. Gayle gratefully wonders a 40-year healing path, meeting and learning from other amazing women healers. Her own healing energy practices are based in a shamanic worldview. Quote, I am blessed to witness spontaneous healing of both mind and body. End quote. Thank you for coming along with us, and thanks to our guests on today's program. Now, let's join Gayle. Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Vicchi Oleski, and I have you're listening to Live Into 5D, Waking Up Our Nature, and it's a recorded but yet very live podcast. And today's guest, very happy and blessed to have met Gayle Swift a number of years ago over in West County, Sebastopol, California. We, like you said earlier, just before I hit the record button, you said, you and I are good at this. And I've when I first met you, oh my God, do you remember when we looked over at each other when you were on that panel?
Yes, I do.
Oh my God. So that's a real moment. And it was like captivating. So let's start there. And also, I just want to remind you and I also what we were talking about just as we were checking in about the elementals. And so, Gayle, please introduce yourself. Let us know from you what you'd like to tell us about you.
Well, first of all, I want to start by saying I have deep gratitude for the work that you're doing. We also talked about this being a very, very intimately challenging time on the planet. And it's a beautiful time for people to come forward, what I call the groundworkers, the everyday, the person next door, your friend. So I am deeply in gratitude for the work that you're doing and in bringing this podcast forward. So, a little bit about myself. I think it'll give context to what I'm going to share during this gathering and maybe in the future gathering as well. I started out in the world with a beautiful family and very, very early on lost my amazing father before I was age 6. Now, why is that important? It's important because it set up a tone that I wasn't quite normal. I was surrounded by a neighborhood where everybody had a mother and a father and 2.5 kids, and we all went to school. Well, that system broke down for me very early. And what it ultimately did was kept the door open for new thought, new ways of looking at the world. And in some ways, I just didn't buy into, or couldn't fall into, is a better way of saying it. I couldn't fall into the consensus of reality. I always felt that somehow I was different. Well, I was different. And It's interesting. My father was a physician. My mother was a nurse. And so, of course, what did I become? I became a nurse. Graduated, got my master's in clinical cardiology. And after that, something began to take over a consciousness. And maybe, who knows, maybe it was even the DNA of my father and me that took me into realizing that medicine was missing a vital point, the human being in the healthcare crisis, in the disease process, if you will. And my father was quoted to have said, there'll come a time in medicine. Now, this was the 50s. There'll come a time in medicine when physicians will be more interested in who the human being is than the disease that they present themselves with. And so that actually became a cornerstone for my searching for my tribe, searching for my community, searching for a new way of being in the world. And I met extraordinary people who were shamans, teachers, wisdom keepers, who I sat at their feet and just took in everything that they had to say to me. I became sort of a sponge, if you will, for a new way of looking at the world. Now, that's been a 30-year journey, so it wasn't overnight that this occurred. So what I'm going to share, actually, as the other thing we talked about is Vicchi and I have no trouble dancing together. So we're going to dance on 2 feet. And the 2 feet is we live in a physical body and with all of the rights therein, but we also live in a mystical body. And I love the fact that this is 5D, because we're going to talk about our 5 lodge poles. The 5 lodge poles that we live in and can be responsible to as mystics walking the earth in a practical way. So my journey started with a great loss, opened the door to a lot. And so I really want to resonate with the fact that a bumpy beginning created a lot of sorrow in me, grief, that I easily learned to suppress a lot of it. But it brought me to the journey of healing, which is really what this is all about, is learning to come back into our wholeness. Because these are times.
I have a question about this before we move forward, because I've really perked my curiosity and interest around the journey that you were gifted at 6, and that, 2 things you said, that we were ground workers. And so often the path of the mystic and shaman and folks like ourselves are seen as light workers. And yet you also said you lost your father at age 6, and you didn't, there was some crack in the consensus of reality. So at that age, did you have a knowing, or did you, what, could you just describe, if you can, those earlier years of what pulled you through?
It's a good question, and I think it's important to bring light to this, but at the same time, I'll just answer your question. Before, this is going to sound interesting because it is interesting to me too, but I was very early, maybe 2 years, 3 years old, when I had a conversation with God, the universe. Whoever was listening, I knew somebody was listening. And I remember having this very consciousness around what an amazing world this is. Wow. I was filled with a sense of love, and I lived in a place that was quite beautiful, and I just mesmerized by the beauty. And I remember asking, well, why am I here? It all looks pretty good to me. Why do you need me? Why do I need to be here? And I said, and my second question is, which came first? Did all the tools come first, or was all of this in place and then you brought the tools? And so I remember having this kind of fascinating conversation with the one who knows this. So why is that important? I think that that the sentience in me never got lost. There was always this voice, this inner voice of, you're okay. You're going to be fine. And that light stayed with me. And all I could say is it was a light of consciousness that was ever present and not tied to, and it was some teachers call it the part of us that was never hurt. Mm-hmm. They were harmed. Mm-hmm. So I had a sense of that.
The wholeness of that consciousness that is not, untouchable.
Yeah, and some people maybe this brings some clarity to it. When we start to get into the realm of mystery and mysticism, words fail us. But one of the things I love was the notion of the face before you were born, that presence before we were born. And so I guess it words are challenging, but I always had a sense of presence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, because I also think for the listeners that are parents, and as I was raising my godson and then also my foster son, these, when we're children, that I'm not quite sure when the realities become form. And I think I know that my partner and I, at the time when we had my godson, who's going to be 17, we really could acknowledge that they were in a different brainwave, and that we were wanting their palette of consciousness to be colored in as much as possible, And when trauma happens, some of that gets discolored and closes down. So, losing a father at 6, I could only imagine, how things can feel dampened down, and troublesome a little bit.
Well, absolutely. And I love where this conversation is going, because Bruce Lipton does a lot of the great teachers talk about how the first 7 years of our life we're in theta, which means we're recording. And I remember distinctly things that I was told as a child, and that light inside me said, that's not true. That's not how it is. But at the same time, I took in some of that programming as a belief about who I am. Mm-hmm. And this will later make sense as we begin to talk about healing and the unwinding of that samsara, that false story. My great teacher, Angela Sarian, called it developing the false self system. We all have a false self system, even if the consciousness is saying, no, that's not true. It somehow gets planted in our very in our body mind, in the memory system. So being a conscious parent, you can't things are still gonna get planted that start us on that journey of recovery.
Sure, absolutely. And what we were talking about earlier when we were checking in, and just to, I hope, bring us back to the point that you were speaking, is about the elementals. And, as children, we're so close to the elements, and that sense of adulting and getting older can bring us a sense of isolation and loneliness sometimes. And I believe that were you speaking to that earlier when we were checking in? And I wanna bring back that theme of what you were talking about.
Well, yes, we were talking about how I think it's important for us to also tag the current reality where we're all in, and then maybe that will support what I'm going to say about the elementals. We're all living in a very interesting time. And you're going to have an astrologer on later who can talk about this, but we're at the end of Pisces, the time of Pisces, and coming into, actually already are into Aquarius, and it's a very different energetic configuration. And so we're in the breakdown of the old structures. So I like to think of it as a slow change and radical change. We're in radical change right now. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we left out, 3,000 years ago, however long ago that was, humanity took a turn and said, we've got it all together. We know how to manage everything. And we left out the resource of nature and the spirits that were here to guide us. We lost that connectivity to the mystery of life that was informing us. And now today, I could go on forever about this, but today we are sadly lost in the 21st century of stress due to that loss of connection to the source of information of nature spirit, and sky spirits or God spirits, the source of life, the universal source of life.
Yeah, we were. I was over with a bunch of friends on Sunday, and we were talking about that this is the age of information.
Yes.
And it's also within the age of information is disinformation, and that can cause a lot of cloudy, scratchy, friction, static, all sorts of crazy. And that I think if we were to remember exactly what you're talking about is to, being present, like you and I were talking about earlier, around nature and the elementals that are always with us. They bring a huge concept, a huge embodied form of information to us. Is that part of what you were speaking about, of what we let go 3,000 years ago or got sidetracked?
Yes, because we're lost today in outer materialistic world. We're in beta overstimulation. We're outer directed in the physical manifested world and have lost touch with the subtle energies. Now, in the shamanic traditions, there's the notion of the medicine wheel. And in the medicine wheel, the four directions are those four elementals, the sky, the sky elemental or air, the water elemental, earth, and then fire. Well, that information comes to us all the time. If we're listening, if we shift altered state of consciousness out of beta stimulation let me interject. I just found out Socrates said, I love this, and I'm using it more and more regularly. All I know is I don't know.
Mm.
And so when I go, I'm confused, I'm looking outside, I'm saying, how can I, outside myself, what I mean. I don't know what's the next step for me. And I think a lot of us are wondering that post-COVID. Well, we're not exactly post-COVID, but we're wondering what should I do now? What's the next step? Well, it's to stop and come into what I call the surrendered presence and shift into that gentle, surrendered place of all I know is I don't know, but I have a wonderful question. And in that questioning, we open up to more of an alpha state, a delta state, a state of potential Joseph Campbell would say bliss, a receptive state. And then guess what? You look up and the tree starts, the wind starts to hit the tree, and a butterfly floats by. And you hear the sound of water. And you start to pay attention to the elementals. And then the deeper you go into that state of stillness, answers come. But that takes remembering and training.
Yeah, it's also a simple form of prayer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right? I think so. I think yeah.
And prayer is the language, I think, of that. Of that inner state. Let's just call it, there's an outer state. We live in two worlds. We're human beings. We're human beings. We're divine and matter. We're with what's the bridge? Soul, that inner state, that inner light, that inner consciousness is the bridge between spirit and matter, between father and mother. And when we can get to that place, that centered, grounded place, is when we start receiving information, new age of information, new information, and begin to let the false self story fall away. And the elementals are here to help that.
What would you say for our listeners? And I'm quite curious. I've got my own go-to daily stuff, things that keep me zinging and tuned in to when I get tuned out. When you're talking about this, what do you suggest for people to do on a, what do you suggest people to do? I was going to say on a daily, but I don't want to fill it in. Like, what do you tell people? Like, what could a practice be for them?
Well, that's an excellent question, and let me give you a synopsis of a very ancient model based in the traditional Chinese medicine, the 5 elemental theory. What I mentioned earlier was the 5 lodge poles, and what I'm going to share is something that each one of us can, and this is what we can do today. This is the first step.
Wonderful.
In learning how to be what many are now calling the new human. The new human, this is an evolutionary time. That's what it is. It's this shifting evolutionary time. And in order to be a part of that shift, we need a new way of perceiving, not necessarily new model, because what I'm going to share is a very ancient model. It's very shamanic. It's very ancient. So this is not Gayle's story. This is an ancient story that I'm gonna take you through it. Would that work for you? Just to take.
I think this is perfect. Perfect. Seeing more people out, seeing people that I haven't seen in 2.5 years, noticing all the changes we've been through. I think it's perfect. So yes, please continue.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a very short picture of what this is about. This is what I do in the morning. This is my morning practice to bring me into a state of surrendered presence. And then during the day, I use parts of that I stop, I pause. Where am I? Am I locked outside of myself, or am I centered in myself? And in the evening, I review, how did I do? Did I stay? The Buddhists call it calm abiding. So this is a way to bring ourselves into the center of ourself. So we start by sitting comfortably. This is not new. And we follow the breath, relax the shoulders. And if you're comfortable, who's out there listening, if you're comfortable, you can just bow your head gently and close your eyes if you're in a safe place, and you can do that. And you're going to begin I'm going to take you through those 5 lodge poles: the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, the spiritual body, and our social connected body, our relational body. And all of us have that. So I'm going to first have you just simply hold your thumb. One hand, hold your thumb. And this is the creative path through the meridians of the body-mind system. And you can bring coherence and harmony to the body-mind without having to do anything. Your job is simply to be in the moment with the breath. So let's take a gentle breath in. And as you exhale, allow yourself to be fully present in the moment. And through simply choosing to, you can release a sense of tension, any discomfort that might just be there with every exhale. What you're doing is you're allowing your body to find a position of rest, safety. I'm okay. And when the body begins to feel that, it then can go deeper inside. And the deeper inside, we're going to have you hold now your ring finger. And the ring finger is associated with the lung, with the breath of life. And here I begin to recognize as a human being that I belong here. The breath of life restores me at every cell of my being. And with the exhalation, I begin to let go of the consensus reality of loss and grief. And I inhale a sense of flow, of being, becoming. And I settle into the moment with deep compassion for what it means to be a divine human being in a most sacred time of evolution, heightened evolution. And I begin to feel some awakening of the possibility of my role as a new human at this time. And now I shift and I hold my index finger. And the index finger is associated with the neurological system, the mind, the busy mind. And as I exhale, I simply listen. I simply listen to the story I might be telling myself. And when there's a space, I interject the I am enough. I am whole being. And I tell myself that I'm here to live the potentiality that is in my DNA, in every cell of my body. And now I hold my middle finger. And my middle finger is associated with actually the organ system of liver and gallbladder. And liver is deeply associated with anger and depression and anxiety. It's a very important organ for keeping us in balance and harmony. So as I hold my middle finger, I acknowledge that anger is not something that I want to get rid of. It's something I want to listen to because it's a warning light that my boundaries, my life force might, in fact, be touched in a way that is no longer appropriate for my creative life purpose. So I thank the energy of anger. And I breathe into it. And as I breathe into it, I exhale out the tension of anger and ask to be shown the path forward on my creative life purpose. In gratitude, I move forward. And now I hold my little finger, and the little finger takes me to the very important lodge pole. And that lodge pole is my social connected community, all my relations. Some of my relations, here we get into the three mirrors, which we can talk about later. But for now, I give deep, deep gratitude to all the people in my life who are teaching me about who I am. And I extend deep forgiveness for those who can't see who I am. And now I cross my hands in front of me and place them over my heart as I settle into a place of deep, calm abiding, centered within myself, safe, whole, and well. And the more I do this, the more I begin to see the choice I have as a human being to shift from stress reactivity to a creative journey of choice and collaboration. So in this day, I set the intention to live as a human being in training, gently loving myself and all who come to me. So the 5 lodge poles.
Beautiful.
Isn't that fun? The 5 lodge poles are the 5, it's actually the 4 elementals held in what's called the acacia or akashic file, the space. So the 4 elements come together in the space, which is correlated with liver. And here we are in spring. Spring, liver is a time for this kind of work. Each one of those points of our being, we use a different skill set to bring into harmony into those. So that's basically what we can do for ourselves to come into coherence, because without coming into coherence, those 5 lodge poles get entangled and confused.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. I experienced just a lot of softness and inner peace, and also was very aware that, this was happening in real time. So I was, very present that something else besides what was happening peacefully internally was also being recorded. Thank you so much, Gayle. It was simple.
Well, it is simple, and oh my gosh, there's so much to say about this, and the deep clinician in me wants to help people understand that this is biochemically correct. This is science. It's an art too, of course. But what we're doing is through the consciousness of choice. I choose to be fully present. I choose to be safe. What happens is that the body is listening, now treating and now creating a biochemical bioterrain of peace. I'm upping my serotonin, my dopamine, my oxytocin, coming into the biochemistry of bliss, the cannabinoids. We actually, well, that's a whole other story, but we have endorphins and cannabinoids, those comfort neurotransmitters that the body is seeking right now. So I can create that simply by using touch, sound, presence. We also use essential oils, a lot of tools that people are using, but it's in a model that I can return to at any time.
Yeah.
So it's biochemically correct.
This is what I like to talk about too. So thank you. This is so yummy. I'm like sitting here going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. It changes our mindset. It changes our physiology.
Yes.
And doing it daily.
Yes.
Gayle, doing it daily. Also, I want to just say that when I do these, I'm a heavy meditator. I love meditating. I love doing these type of exercises and techniques because I think often we go looking for things that are wrong. And through techniques and exercises and technologies and meditation, they percolate up through the unconscious to be released. So often, right?
Yeah.
So often when we go into a exercise or a guided meditation like you just did for us, pardon the dog, things can percolate and be released as well as, and that changes the game.
Well, it does, and the science of it is called self-directed neuroplasticity. We're literally changing the neuron connections, and you'll notice we didn't do anything. It's not about doing. And I came to this very early on when I realized meditation for many people is very difficult. So a body-based, well, we use the mind too, we use the whole thing, but when we include the body in this journey, it's very, very, very helpful. I love how our four-leggeds are wanting to be included in this conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
So it's self-directed neuroplasticity. So we all need some care of self modality today to come into the state of calm and abiding so that we become transformers of energy in this time when there's so much chaos and breakdown.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
much.
Thank you, Gayle, so much. And I want to remind that the listeners that took how I was experiencing it. So I think it took like 7-8 minutes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, a very, very empowering, powerful, profound exercise that doesn't take a lot of long time processing through anything. It's just like being there with you, like you're saying, it's not about doing, it's about being.
We can get into this more later, but this is a snapshot of a study that I did, and it's about shifting consciousness interiorly in our inner natures, like you talk about that inner nature, bringing in the 5D. Well, when we shift our consciousness, it shifts the body. We start to feel better. We start to have more vitality, resilience. But it's not, I don't want to say but, and it's a practice. It's very important that we find the practice that brings us into calm abiding and do it every day.